Hello, my name is Dr. Eric Tucker. Welcome back as we continue discussing egoism. To reiterate what we mentioned in the last video, egoism is about long-term self-interest. We're not thinking here about indulgence. Eliminate the long-term and we arrive at immediate gratification. Here we're looking at well-thought-out long-term ethical reflection. So, who are some of the key proponents or the key people that promoted egoism? Egoism doesn't really have a founder. There have been forms of egoism throughout history. At least two modern egoists, though, have had a very significant impact, and even more recently today continue to have that impact: Friedrich Nietzsche and Ayn Rand. Let's look at Nietzsche first. Nietzsche came from a religious background. With a brilliant mind, he came to question all religion and all philosophy before him, including ethical and moral thinking. He's famous for his phrase, "God is dead and we killed him." What was he referring to? It was his conclusion that not only religion, but even philosophy can no longer give us moral guidance. Reason, philosophy, science all fail to give moral direction. Well, if you accept that position, and not everyone does, then what should a human do? What makes a great human being? The answer is found in the phrase, the will to power, or the Superman. The truly great human being reaches beyond moral questions of good and evil and reaches for power and strength of will. Nietzsche does not mean here a ruthless dictator or a robber baron. Taking his cue from Darwin, nature drives not toward the masses, but and certainly not toward the weak, but rather toward the extraordinary specimens, the geniuses that rise above. War is good. Peace brings lethargy and mediocrity. War brings energy and geniuses emerge. The tens of thousands that died in Napoleon's campaigns had lives with more meaning because they followed a genius. Now, Nietzsche's own health kept him from a military career. Or a genius might also be a person who struggles and by power of will overcomes some physical handicap. The key here is not notoriety, but strength of will. This aspect of Nietzsche has some appeal. Going through intense physical illness himself, he writes this phrase, "And so onward, along a path of wisdom, with a hearty tread and a hearty confidence. However you may be your own source of experience. Throw off your discontent about your nature. Forgive yourself, your own self. You have it in your power to merge everything you have lived through, false starts, errors, delusions, passions, your loves and your hopes, into your goal with nothing left over." Compassion, however, also must be rejected as a weakness. Civilization, according to Nietzsche, and especially Christianity, had turned Europeans into herd animals and domesticated at that. Pity, far from a virtue, is deplorable. Pity preserves things, Nietzsche writes, that are ripe for decline. It defends things that have been disowned and condemned by life. It gives a depressive and questionable character to life itself by keeping alive an abundance of failures of every type. Now, though Nietzsche was not anti-Semitic and certainly wasn't a Nazi, it's easy to see why he became one of the favorite philosophers of Nazi leadership and how some of his ideas would have been embraced by Hitler. One last quote. "What is good? All that heightens the feelings of power in man. The will to power, power itself. What is bad? All that is born of weakness. What is happiness? The feeling that power is growing, that resistance is overcome. What is more harmful than any vice? Active pity for all the failures and all the weak." Ayn Rand is yet another important egoist in today's environment. Born in Russia around the time of the Bolshevik Revolution, she saw firsthand the scarcity caused by collectivization. Farms had become communal and were less productive. Factories were being run by committees. She remembered literal hunger. Having made it into the university, she was struck by Nietzsche's idea of the hero, but couldn't agree with his rejection of reason. Aristotle became her guide into reason. Escaping from Russia, she came to the US, where she developed her philosophy of individual rational self-interest. Have you ever experienced a truly dysfunctional group project? If I ask my students that question, not only do the hands go up, but I begin to hear groans among some of the class. Ask yourself why it is that group projects so often fail and go so badly. Students often respond that as soon as the less motivated students realize that there's one truly motivated student, they sit back and allow the one or two students to do all the work. Now imagine, if you will, that everything in society is a group project. What would be the result? Would you want to live there? This might be descriptive of Ayn Rand's experience and may somewhat explain her passionate insistence on self-interest as the great motivator. Ayn Rand insisted that if individuals and corporations they run were rational about their long-term best self-interest, ethical issues would take care of themselves. Companies would understand the need for roads and cooperate to build them. The government would not need to build an interstate system. There would really be no need for pressuring society to hire women or pay them equal pay. Companies that discriminate against half of the population would not be competitive. And the smart companies would implement those programs out of self-interest. Rational self-interest would lead to cooperation and higher ethical standards. Managers and CEOs are worth the money they make, she would say, since they are the ones that create the companies and make them successful and profitable. If you want to be a humanitarian, well, that's your business, but don't go calling it a virtue. The only real virtue is self-interest, since that's what creates economic growth. My philosophy, she says, in essence, is the concept of a man as a heroic being with his own happiness, the moral purpose of his life, productive achievement as his noblest activity, and reason his only absolute. Notice the 3 points here. So, first, there's one's happiness, and that's the moral purpose of life. Second, productive achievement, and that's the noblest activity, what you do to contribute to society in your profession. And finally, of course, reason, as the only way to know for sure. Now, she was known for her astoundingly sharp mental abilities. Is Ayn Rand really influential today? Increasingly so. Atlas Shrugged, probably her most important book, continues to be read, discussed, and referenced. She's frequently referred to by many politicians as having been very influential in their thinking. One of her more prominent followers was Alan Greenspan, head of the Federal Reserve. And when Greenspan was sworn in under President Ford, Ayn Rand was right there in the Oval Office to accompany him. For more of an idea of Ayn Rand, her person, and her philosophy, Atlas Shrugged might be a good place to start. There are also several very interesting interviews of Ayn Rand on the internet if you are interested in watching videos. We'll get back to criticisms later on. Thank you.